CYC, Christian Youth Channel.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode on the Lighthouse. The Lighthouse is our way of bringing God's light into our houses. My name's Martina and I'm joined by
Abhinav.
Hi Abhinav. And today we have Mark talking to us about why do you need God? Abba, do you have any stories or anything, or what's your take on this?
Yeah, we just need him because we're sinners, basically. And someone was telling me this story this morning, actually. The writer of the song Amazing Grace, I don't know if you've heard of the song, he was actually a slave trader, and he was bringing in slaves from Jamaica, I think it was Kenya, one of the two, bringing in from there and taking them to England. It was very, very, like a very long trip, around one and a half months. On the way, they encountered a storm, and he said, God, if you're there, if you save me through this storm, I'll change my ways. I'm never going to touch these slaves again. I'll change my ways, become a Christian and all that. And he did in fact change his ways. Got back to England. 75% of the slaves died. The rest of them survived, but he let all of them go. And he wrote the song Amazing Grace.
Wow.
And that's one of those, just one of the millions of stories that show us that we do need God. We are sinners.
Yeah, no, I have a more personal take on this. So, my dad, when he was younger, he had like some skin growing over his eye, and back in Egypt in those days, it was like 100% you're going to be blind. So, like, he went to go to Cairo and have an operation, but the night before, this is what he says. He was praying and was like, God, please, I need you to not make me go blind. I want my sight, and it was your gift that I could have sight. And so when the night before the operation, he slept, and the next day he woke up, and his brother woke him up, and he told his brother, and his brother found this little cotton bud next to his pillow. He's like, what the hell is that? So my dad was telling him, oh, I saw St. Mary, and she took off the skin. And we still have it till this day, the little cotton plug with the piece of skin. And I don't know, ever since then, my dad's just been like, I've always needed my sight, and it was a gift from God, so that's why I need God. So yeah.
I think it just shows that the age of miracles is not over.
Yeah.
It's still going.
Yeah.
We do have a hymn by the hymns team called Renewed. So let's give that a listen, and we'll be back shortly.
Renew my mind. The world is changing so fast, with more transform our minds and mold our thoughts to know how to discern when we are faced with doubts, uncertainties, but place a heart of love, completely yours, completely yours.
Welcome back, guys. We'd like to thank our hymns team for that lovely hymn. Tonight we have a guest speaker. Some may say we're cursed, some may say we're blessed, but this man has a very special place in my heart. We have Mark Bastaros talking to us today about the topic, why do I need God?
Thanks, Eva. I can only just say I'm blessed to just sitting next to you. It's a big blessing.
I wish I can say the same. I continue. I go for it.
And for those wondering why Abba keeps moving his head, it's because he's worried about how his hairline looks in the monitor. But anyway, so yeah, like Abba said, we're talking about why do I need God, or why do we need God? And I guess it's a really hard question to answer. It's almost an impossible question to answer because there are infinite reasons why we need God. And it's a question we're going to be asking ourselves and discussing with people for the rest of our lives. But I guess it's a question that you'll hear specifically from two types of people. You'll either hear it from people that consider themselves to be good. You know, I'm a good person, I do good things, you know, I donate to charity, I feed the homeless, I do missionary trips. Why do I need God? If I'm already good, why do I need a God in my life? Or you hear it from someone that's highly successful or has everything. You know, I've got family, friends, wealth, success, career, money. I've got everything I need. Why do I need God in my life? And the reason why you'll hear that question often is because needing something suggests that I lack something in the first place. So, you know, for example, you know, Abba, you're hungry, you lack food. So you need food. You need food. You know, Martina, you get thirsty, so you need a drink. You know, you're lacking that thing that's going to satisfy your thirst. If I'm financially lacking in some way, or I'm broke, or I've gone into bankruptcy, then I need a job, or I need a raise. I need something that's going to fill that gaping hole in my life. And so, I guess the generic answer to why do I need God is the C.S. Lewis definition, that everybody has a God-shaped hole in their hearts. Everybody is incomplete without God, and whether we recognize it or not, we have this innate yearning for Him, this itch, this desire that won't go away until I allow Him to enter into my life. Everybody has a God-shaped hole in their hearts. Why? Why is it that everyone on some level feels this way? Why is it inbuilt within me that I need God? I think the reason, well, first, before I give a reason, if I need God, then it suggests that I'm incomplete without Him, which is what I mentioned before. It suggests that there is a hole in my life that is, severely lacking something, being Him. I'm incomplete. I'm not whole without God if I need Him. So the question really isn't, why do I need God, but what do I really need from God? What do I really need from Him? What does He fill? Which hole in my life is He filling? How does He make me complete? And so for us to understand this, we have to assume that all beliefs about God are true. Okay, so we have to believe first and foremost that God exists, and if He exists and everything else about God is true, if we assume that all beliefs about God are true, then I believe that He created the world. Okay? Because that is a foremost belief about God. And He created it to be perfect. And that includes man. And we know this from Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 27. In it He says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.' So God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created them." And do you know what He said about man after He created them? Do you guys know? So what did He say after every creation He made?
It is good.
It was good.
Yeah.
And what did He say after man? It was very good. Man wasn't just good. Man didn't just satisfy, a goodness. Man was the crown of his creation. We were the crown of his creation because we were created to be the image of God. We were created to be the image of God. A really prominent theological professor by the name of Wayne Grudem writes this about that specific verse. He says, when God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness," the meaning is that God plans to make a creature similar to himself. Both the Hebrew word for image, which is teslim, and the Hebrew word for likeness, which is demut, refer to something that is similar but not identical to the thing it represents or is an image of. The word image can also be used of something that represents something else. Or said another way, God created us to be like him in certain ways and to represent him. We were created to be his representation. So the unfallen man reflects the image of God in that we were endowed with all the transferable attributes of God, such as our capacity for love, capacity for wisdom, compassion, holiness, righteousness, anything that can be transferred, anything transmittable. We were created in that likeness of God. Of course, there are attributes, for anyone that wants to argue it, there are attributes of God that aren't transferable. His omnipotence, the fact that he's all-knowing, he can be in all places at one time, he can't give that to creature, to us, because that's uniquely part of his nature. Does that make sense so far? Okay. But in essence, what this verse and what, Professor Wayne Grudem is saying is that we were created to be like God. We were created to be like God. We were created in perfection with all the attributes of God. Which is why it's ironic that the temptation to be like God was the ultimate downfall of man. You remember in Genesis 3 verses 4 and 5, the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And so it was in this moment when Adam and Eve fell into this, when they, I want to say, deviated from this image, that this image of God was broken. It was shattered. Enter into the world lying, murder, cheating, adultery. And little by little, this image becomes completely distorted. It becomes completely shattered. And we cease looking like God altogether. We no longer look like him. The image that he created, it doesn't look like that anymore. That perfection is gone. But then throughout the whole Old Testament, I'm just trying to make this really quick, so I'll take you on a quick journey. Throughout the whole Old Testament, we see glimpses of the image of God shining through a very, very dark world. We see it in the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Then Jacob's son, Joseph, comes, and he's a type of Christ. Shows us a little bit of his nature. Then Moses, Joshua, King David, Daniel. They all give us a glimpse into the image of God. They are all pieces, and when you put them all together, you get a mosaic of what the restoration of this image would ultimately look like. That mosaic being the image of Christ. Okay? So we have man created to be like God. We destroyed the image of God. We get a little bit of a glimpse into it throughout the whole Old Testament, and then Christ comes. And so Christ comes and he shares into this fallen world. He shares into this broken image, right? And he looks around, he sees all this brokenness, he sees the darkness, the natural disasters, prostitution, theft, division, all the things that contribute to our brokenness, and he offers his solution. He introduces himself in Luke chapter 4 by saying the following words. This is his introduction as to his solution to this brokenness that he sees around him. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." So, for me to need something, that thing needs to have a purpose, right? What's the purpose of food?
Satisfy your hunger.
Yeah, come on, you know the
Yeah.
purpose of election. It's
All right, mate. Yeah.
it's to satisfy. It's sustenance. Purpose of water. It's to quench my thirst. You know, the purpose of anything. Something needs to have a purpose so that it can fulfill that need. And so Christ here is saying, this is my purpose. My purpose on this planet, on this earth, is to preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives. All of this makes sense. You know, superficial level, we read it, we like it, we highlight it in our Bibles, looks nice, looks pleasant. You know, heal the brokenhearted, God, my heart, he left me, you know, she left me, whatever. You know, I highlight it, it's nice. But then at the end he says, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. And we ignore it because what does that mean? Who cares? All the nice things he already said before. But this is critical to understanding why I need God. What is the acceptable year of the Lord? To understand this again, we've got to go back to the Old Testament, specifically the book of Leviticus. Okay, we know every 7 days in the Jewish week, the 7th day is what?
Sabbath.
The Sabbath. And what do they do on the Sabbath?
They rest.
They rest. They dedicate that day is a holy day. They dedicate that day to the Lord. But in Leviticus, there was a law. And that law said, every 7 days is a Sabbath, you shall dedicate it to the Lord. Every 7 years is a Sabbath year. You shall dedicate that year to the Lord also. Okay? And then after 7 lots of 7, so after 49 years, so every 7 years being, you know, a Sabbath year, there is an additional year set apart for the Lord, the 50th year. And that year, does anyone know what that was called? Any takers? $100. Yeah, no? You want to just take a guess?
A leapy.
Not a leafy, but I appreciate the guess. No, the year was called the year of Jubilee. The year of Jubilee. And it was an extra special year. And it was announced with the blowing of trumpets. In fact, the very name, Jubilee, means the continuous sound of a horn blast. Jubilee was the name of the horn, the sound of the horn, and the name of the feast. Okay? It was a year of jubilation, a year of joy, a year of ecstasy. It was a holy year, and it was consecrated and set apart. And the reason it was so joyful was because the reason for this year was to liberate all the people. To liberate all people. It was God's solution to poverty, to slavery, to bondage. In Proverbs 22 verse 7, it says that the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is servant to the lender. So anytime you owed a debt, you essentially became a servant to the person who gave you that loan. You became their servant. And so in Old Testament times, when you owed a debt you couldn't pay, you literally became the servant of the person you owed, and you lost control of all your property, all your assets, until your debt was paid. Like, imagine that. You now belong to someone else because they gave you a loan. And so long as you don't pay that debt off, you belong to that person. You're their servant. So the year of Jubilee was sacred because it was a year of, release, when a debt-induced servanthood ended. Okay? That all debts, all mortgages were cancelled. All slaves were freed. All family inheritance was restored. Everything restored. You were free from all captivity to debt, all captivity to poverty, to slavery, whatever it is. Land that had been sold was returned to its original owners. Imagine that, and everyone was given a fresh start in business, free from the bondage of debt, free from any debt. And so Christ comes and he proclaims to everyone, in me, you will have eternal jubilee. You will have eternal freedom. You will have eternal freedom, eternal liberty from the bondage of sin, liberty from the captivity and rule of Satan. That is, he's redefining the acceptable year of the Lord. In me is the acceptable year. This is the final year. I'm offering eternal jubilation, eternal jubilee. Eternal jubilee. How are you going to do that? That's our question to him. How are you going to do that? We're a broken image of what was supposed to be a perfect world. How are you going to do that? The answer he gives He gives it over the course of all 4 Gospels. But we're going to zone in onto Matthew 9 and just look at one short passage to get a better idea of how he was going to heal this broken world and give freedom, give total liberty to this captivity we were under, to this brokenness we had made ourselves slaves to. In Matthew 9, verse 2 to 7, you guys know the story very well. It says, "Then behold, they brought to him a paralytic lying on a bed. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, 'Son, be of good cheer, your sins are forgiven you.' And at once some of the scribes said within themselves, 'This man blasphemes.' But Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, 'Why do you think evil in your hearts? For which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven you, or to say, arise and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins.' Then he said to the paralytic, 'Arise, take up your bed, and go to your house.' And he arose and departed to his house." It's an interesting story because here you have a man that is seemingly, by all meanings of the word, incomplete. He's incomplete. He's broken. And Christ looks at him, and almost to emphasize the point, rather than healing him, before anything else, what does he do?
Forgives you.
He forgives him. Before healing him, the problem's there, it's obvious. What does this man need? Why does this man need anything? If this man needs something, what is it? It's to move. It's healing. That's what he needs. But God, Christ, emphasizing a point, says no. Before anything else, he needs forgiveness. Because he's teaching us that our completeness is not in our outward appearance, but in our redemption. Our completeness, our healing from this broken image, is not in how I look outwardly, how I appear outwardly. My goodness, my wealth, my success. It's not in any of that. It's in my restoration to the image of God. And that can only come through forgiveness. So why do I need God? I need him for everything. There are infinite reasons why I need God. But why do I need God? What is the purpose of Christ coming down to earth? I need him so that I can be restored to my original image. And he offers me that restoration through the forgiveness of my sins. Does that make sense? Mm. We said at the beginning we were created to be like God. We were created to be like God. But then we broke that image. The question is, can I ever return? Saint Athanasius says yes, you can return. He says God became man so that man can become like God. That's from his book on the Incarnation, which is an Orthodox treasure. God became man so that man can become like God. We were like God. We broke it, but he came back so that I can be like him. He offers me that restoration. He offers me that redemption. And I'll just finish off with a really quick story. It's a story about Ravi Zacharias. Do you guys know who that is? He's a really prominent Christian apologetic who recently passed away. But his books and his videos, are still the gems. So go home, watch them after. And for anyone watching, the most beneficial thing I can say is that his thoughts on this topic, why do I need God, far outweigh anything I could have said. But he talks about his own experience finding Christ. And he says that in India, because he's from India, in India there's a day that was known as the Day of Shame. This day was the day that all exam results, high school or university, I'm not 100% sure, all university results would come out on this day. And on this day, there were the highest rates of suicide in all of India. It was the Day of Shame, And in his family, he was the failure. He was the one who wasn't really successful at school, didn't really try, didn't really have much going for him. And so, whether it was on this day or very close after it, he himself attempted suicide. He was at home, no one else was home except their servant. They had a servant in their house. And he tried to ingest chemicals. He mixed chemicals in a bag and he tried to ingest it. And he said his body started to reject it. So much so that he was crying out in agony, screaming, "Someone help, someone help." And so his servant comes rushing to the door, can't get through the door, so he slams the door down. And the next thing Ravi knows is he's in the hospital, attached to all these lines, all these drips, getting fluids, getting medication, barely conscious. And his parents wouldn't let anyone come in. But then he says, one man persisted and wanted to see him. And somehow he got through his mum. Right? He got through his mum, and I just, for some reason, I imagine his mum to be Egyptian, because if my mum's at the door, no one's getting through. You know, my mum, she's, yeah. Martina's like, yeah, no one's getting through Tante Mary. Like, that's not happening. But somehow this man got through. And he came in with a red New Testament Bible. And he asked him, can I speak to you about Jesus? And Ravi says, you know, sure. And he explains that the reason why he just sort of succumbed to this guy's, you know, whatever, attempts, because he said, this was a crossroads for my life. It was a crossroads for my life. He said, in my heart, in my head, I woke up that day thinking, you didn't know how to live, and you didn't even know how to die. What purpose do you have in this world? So this man comes, he visits him in hospital, and he says, I just want to read to you one chapter. And so they read John 14. And the verse that struck out to Ravi said, it was Christ speaking to the disciples, speaking to the multitudes, and he says, because I live, you shall live also. You shall live also. Because I'm alive, you shall also have life. And so Ravi says this prayer. He says, Jesus, he says this on that day. Jesus, if you are offering me life like I have never had it, I want that life from you. And then the interviewer that was talking to Ravi at the time asks him, what life was it that Christ offered you? What was it that Christ satisfied in your life? What hole did he fill that you were after? What life did he give you? And his answer was, a life restored, a life forgiven. So why do I need God? I need him because he offers me life as it was meant to be lived, in his image, in his likeness. And he does that by restoring me to himself through the forgiveness of my sins. And glory be to God forever. Amen.
Wow. That's very good. Thank you for that, Mark. I think we have one question. So the question is, what are the consequences of thinking to ourselves that we don't need God in our lives?
It's a really good question.
It is. I wonder who thought of it.
What do you think?
I think the very simple answer is that we're going to suffer. We're going to suffer. Someone was saying earlier, just before the show, someone was telling me that you're going to try and find something to fill that void, like you were talking about earlier, to fill that hole. If you keep looking for that in other directions, you're going to keep looking for that love that God can give you in other people, in other materialistic things. You're not going to find that. And you're just going to hit rock bottom. And I think that person was saying rock bottom is basically just losing all hope. But yeah, that's my very simple take on that.
That's the right answer. That, exactly like you said, we'll be seeking satisfaction from everything.
Yeah.
You know, we'll find it temporarily in relationships. We'll find it temporarily in success or in wealth or in even family, friends. But like you said, it's materialistic, it's temporary. It's not real. It doesn't fully satisfy my heart's desires because I can lose that in an instance. What's the difference between happiness and joy?
Nothing.
No, there's a difference.
Is it?
Yeah.
That was a trick question.
What's the difference between happiness and joy?
The
The biblical Sunday school answer is that joy is a fruit of the Holy Spirit, happiness technically isn't.
Yeah.
That's true. Joy is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. Okay, but that's not the significant difference. Happiness is dependent on my happenings. It's dependent on my circumstances. You know, you might look around and say, okay, well, that person's really happy, really successful, he's got, you know, the best relationships, friendships, you know, they got all the money, they look good, you know, whatever. They got the best hair, you know, like, you might look at that person and say they're really happy. But what happens when, you know, something goes wrong?
Yeah.
What happens when, you know, they go bolt? Like, what happens?
They've got nowhere to go to.
Yeah, they got nowhere to go. That happiness is temporary. It's dependent on my circumstances.
Yeah.
But joy is eternal. It's everlasting. It can't be taken away from you. The biggest consequence of living a life without needing God or thinking I don't need God is that I'm always going to feel empty. There's always going to be a God-shaped hole in my heart. I have a friend within the church now, who before he came to the church, only a few years ago, he's an Italian guy, really well off, you know, comes from a very wealthy family, really successful, looks great, you know, he's got everything going for him. And then one day he just said, I'm not satisfied. Nothing fulfills me. And so he ran into an old childhood friend who had recently, only at that time, he had only recently joined the church. And so he looks at him and says, this childhood friend, by the way, was really cheeky growing up, really always, you know, angry at school, always, you know, unhappy, you know, always acting out, getting himself in trouble. And then he sees him and he finds him to be smiling and happy and peaceful, and he's like, man, forgive me for asking this, but what changed? And he said, Jesus, man. Like, Jesus changed everything. And he can change things for you. And so he invited him to the Bible study at our church, and since that day, he hasn't stopped, you know, wanting more. He hasn't stopped wanting more of Christ. And a couple of years ago, he got baptized in the church. All because he felt this emptiness. When I feel that I don't need God, the biggest consequence is that I'm always going to feel that emptiness.
Very nice. Well said.
Thanks.
Well said.
Said by you. Yeah.
I think that is all we have time for today. I would like to thank our guest speaker, Mike Pistavros. Thank you for joining us. My name is Abinab Halim. This is Martina Malik. I would like to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week, God willing. Enjoy the night. Thank you.